What if I told you that a woman's deepest pleasure doesn't begin in her body, but in her mind? That the secret to making her tremble, to making her think about you long after you've gone, has less to do with technique and everything to do with connection, awareness, and emotion. Most people think they know what turns a woman on, but very few understand what truly awakens her. Today, we're going to explore a side of intimacy that most never talk about: the science, the psychology, and the emotion behind breast arousal, and how, when done with care and understanding, it can create a level of connection that feels almost spiritual. This isn't about performance or fantasy, it's about presence. It's about understanding that a woman's body isn't a switch to be flipped, but an instrument to be tuned, one that responds to the energy, patience, and emotional safety you bring into the moment. Because when you touch her with curiosity instead of expectation, when your hands listen as much as they move, her body begins to open in ways that words could never describe. Stay with me till the end of this video, because what you're about to learn will change the way you think about pleasure forever. You'll understand why the female body reacts the way it does, what science says about the connection between the mind and arousal, and how to use that knowledge not to impress her, but to connect with her. This is not just education, it's evolution, a chance to deepen intimacy, to build confidence, and to experience closeness on a level that most people never reach. So take a breath, open your mind, and let's dive into a conversation that every adult should hear, one that goes beyond the surface and into the heart of what it truly means to give and receive pleasure with awareness, respect, and connection. The breasts are one of the most sensitive and emotionally charged areas of the female body, not only because of their visual or symbolic meaning, but because of the complex network of nerves and hormonal pathways that connect them directly to the brain's centers of pleasure and attachment. Within the breast tissue, thousands of nerve endings branch from the fourth intercostal nerve, extending into the areola and nipples. When gently stimulated, these nerves send signals to the hypothalamus, which triggers the release of oxytocin, the bonding hormone. This is the same chemical that floods the body during affectionate touch, breastfeeding, or orgasm. In the context of intimacy, this release deepens feelings of connection and trust, while also increasing sensitivity throughout the body. Breast stimulation can therefore become more than a physical act. It is a neurological dialogue between partners. The human brain interprets gentle, rhythmic, and caring touch as safety, which in turn activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the part of the body responsible for rest, digestion, and arousal. When a woman feels safe and emotionally open, her body's natural sensitivity heightens, making even light touch feel amplified. The key lies in awareness, understanding that the breasts are deeply responsive organs that mirror a woman's emotional state. If she feels pressure, anxiety, or detachment, the same touch that might bring pleasure could instead create resistance. But if she feels emotionally held and understood, her body interprets touch as an affirmation of trust, which allows arousal to unfold organically. Science also shows that the sensory experience of breast stimulation is unique in its connection to both the limbic system, which governs emotion, and the somatosensory cortex, which processes physical sensation. This dual activation explains why touch on the breasts can evoke not just pleasure, but deep feelings of affection, intimacy, and vulnerability. Unlike more direct forms of stimulation, the arousal here is layered. It moves through the emotional body before it fully reaches the physical one. For many women, this makes the experience of breast-focused intimacy emotionally grounding and powerfully connecting. However, not all stimulation leads to the same response. Each woman's body is unique, and her relationship with her own sensitivity is shaped by her history, confidence, and comfort with touch. Partners who approach this area with mindfulness, curiosity, and respect allow her to guide the pace and pressure, creating a shared rhythm that builds trust. This cooperative approach mirrors what happens in the brain. two people sensing emotionally through touch. Over time, this kind of attuned connection strengthens the neural and emotional pathways between them, reinforcing intimacy long after the moment has passed. Ultimately, the breasts are not just centers of pleasure, but symbols of emotional resonance, connection, and care. When approached with understanding and sensitivity, stimulation here activates a whole body experience of warmth, safety, and closeness. It's not about technique or intensity, it's about attunement, a merging of physical science and emotional intelligence that turns touch into communication and pleasure into connection. A woman's body and mind are deeply intertwined, and her experience of pleasure is never separate from her emotional landscape. The ability to feel aroused, receptive, or even comfortable during intimacy depends greatly on how safe she feels with her partner. This sense of safety is not only emotional but also physiological, as the body's nervous system responds directly to feelings of trust or threat. When a woman feels emotionally secure, the parasympathetic nervous system, which governs relaxation and arousal, becomes active, allowing her body to open up to sensation. When she feels anxious, pressured, or disconnected, the sympathetic nervous system takes over, tightening muscles, restricting blood flow, and numbing sensitivity. Understanding this connection is essential for building intimacy that feels natural rather than forced. Emotional safety begins long before physical touch. It's created through consistent gestures of care, honesty, and respect. When a woman senses that she can express herself without judgment or expectation, her nervous system begins to relax. Her body interprets kindness and emotional availability as cues that it is safe to experience vulnerability. That emotional security transforms into physiological openness. Her heart rate slows, her breathing deepens, and her body becomes more responsive. This is not about control or performance, it's about attunement. A partner who pays attention to her comfort, her pace, and her emotional signals is helping her nervous system feel safe enough to experience pleasure more deeply. The role of oxytocin, often called the bonding hormone, is central here. When two people share emotional closeness or affectionate touch, oxytocin levels rise, strengthening the feeling of trust and connection. This same hormone enhances sensitivity and arousal, proving that emotional and physical intimacy are not separate experiences, but two expressions of the same connection. A woman who feels emotionally distant or misunderstood is less likely to respond physically, not because of lack of desire, but because her body instinctively protects her from vulnerability. Emotional safety dissolves those barriers, allowing pleasure to flow naturally instead of being forced. For a partner, this means learning to slow down and create space for emotional connection before and during intimacy, listening without rushing, maintaining eye contact, using words that affirm rather than demand. These small actions send powerful messages to the body that it is safe to feel. When a woman feels emotionally seen, her body often follows with deeper sensitivity and engagement. It's not about creating excitement through intensity, but through presence. Emotional connection is the foundation that turns physical touch into meaningful pleasure because the body cannot truly open where the heart feels closed. When emotional safety exists, physical pleasure becomes effortless. It is no longer something to chase or manufacture. It arises naturally from trust. The more a woman feels safe with her partner, the more her body responds as an extension of that emotional connection. In this way, intimacy becomes a reflection of care and understanding, a union of two nervous systems in balance, where pleasure is not just a reaction, but a shared expression of emotional harmony. Touch is one of the oldest and most profound languages in human connection. And when used with mindfulness and presence, it becomes a bridge between two nervous systems. In intimacy, the way touch is given is often more important than where it lands. The body recognizes intention long before the mind interprets meaning. When touch carries respect, patience, and awareness, it speaks to the subconscious in a way that words cannot. The breasts, being among the most emotionally responsive areas of the body, react not only to pressure or temperature, but to the emotional energy behind each movement. A rushed or mechanical approach signals the body to remain guarded, while slow, attuned touch invites relaxation, curiosity, and openness. It tells the body that this is a safe space, a space where pleasure is allowed to unfold naturally rather than be demanded. Presence in touch is about giving your full attention, not just your hands. The mind must be still, focused on the moment and on the other person's response rather than on performance or outcome. When a partner's breathing, rhythm, and energy are aligned, it creates what researchers call interpersonal resonance, a subtle synchronization that amplifies pleasure and emotional closeness. This shared rhythm releases oxytocin, dopamine, and endorphins, forming a neurochemical loop of connection and calm. The more present one becomes, the more attuned one grows to subtle changes, a shift in breathing, a small sound, or a tightening of muscles that signal comfort, desire, or hesitation. Responding to these cues with patience and sensitivity transforms the experience from stimulation to communication. Rhythm is also crucial. The body responds best to patterns that mimic natural human rhythms, slow, wave like motions that follow the pace of the breath or heartbeat. Abrupt or inconsistent movements can startle the nervous system, breaking the flow of arousal. Gentle rhythm, on the other hand, allows the body to predict and anticipate touch, deepening the sense of trust. When a partner sustains a consistent and thoughtful pace, it gives the body time to relax into sensation, transforming touch from fleeting pleasure into lasting emotional memory. Equally important is warmth, not just in temperature, but in emotional tone. Skin to skin contact naturally raises oxytocin levels, but warmth also comes from emotional presence, being kind, patient, and engaged. Touch delivered without attention feels cold, even if it's technically skillful, while touch given with genuine affection and care feels nurturing and safe. The body can distinguish between the two instantly. Warmth, both physical and emotional, communicates safety to the nervous system, allowing the body to deepen its response and to interpret pleasure as connection rather than tension. Ultimately, mindful and rhythmic touch is a form of emotional intelligence expressed through the body. It honors the partner's pace and individuality, transforming physical intimacy into a mutual exchange rather than a one sided act. When both people remain present, aware, and emotionally connected, touch becomes not just a stimulus, but a shared language of care, one that deepens emotional and physical closeness while creating a memory that the body continues to hold long after the moment has passed. A woman's body is a living system that changes with time, emotion, and biology. And one of the most important yet often overlooked aspects of intimacy is understanding how these natural rhythms affect sensitivity and arousal. Hormones are the body's invisible language, constantly shifting to influence energy levels, emotions, and physical responsiveness. Estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone all play roles in shaping how a woman feels in her body. During certain phases of the menstrual cycle, especially near ovulation, estrogen levels peak, increasing blood flow and heightening sensitivity in areas like the breasts and skin. This biological change can make touch feel more stimulating and pleasurable, not because of any external technique, but because her body is naturally more receptive at that time. At other stages of her cycle, particularly right before menstruation, the same areas may feel tender or even slightly uncomfortable. This is not a sign of disinterest or distance. It's simply her body's way of signaling a need for gentler touch. When a partner understands and respects these fluctuations, it creates a deeper sense of trust and attunement. She feels that her body is being listened to, not controlled or ignored. That awareness is a cornerstone of intimacy because emotional closeness often grows from the feeling of being understood without needing to explain. Beyond hormonal cycles, factors like stress, sleep, and diet also influence sensitivity. High stress, for instance, raises cortisol levels, which constrict blood vessels and dampen the natural flow of arousal. When life feels heavy or rushed, the body instinctively prioritizes survival over pleasure. This is why emotional calm, relaxation, and mindfulness matter as much as any physical act. A partner who encourages rest, relaxation, and emotional grounding is also nurturing the biological conditions that allow pleasure to flourish. Understanding hormonal rhythms also helps remove unnecessary pressure. Many couples experience moments when desire doesn't align perfectly, and without awareness, this can be misinterpreted as rejection or incompatibility. But in truth, the body simply moves through natural cycles of openness and restoration. When this is understood, intimacy becomes less about expectation and more about connection, responding to the moment with empathy rather than frustration. A woman who feels her body is honored in all its phases becomes more confident and expressive, both emotionally and physically. This awareness can also deepen communication between partners. Talking openly about comfort energy levels or cycle changes strengthens the emotional bond and replaces uncertainty with understanding. When both partners learn to see these natural shifts as part of her rhythm rather than obstacles to overcome, intimacy becomes fluid and alive. The key is not to chase the perfect moment, but to move with her body's natural tempo. Just as the seasons change without losing their beauty, a woman's body moves through cycles of sensitivity and calm, each with its own value and meaning. Recognizing and respecting that natural flow transforms intimacy from a performance into a shared dance between biology, emotion, and care, creating a partnership where connection grows deeper because it moves in harmony with her nature. Communication is the foundation of all deep and lasting intimacy. And when it comes to female arousal, it is often the missing link that transforms connection from ordinary to extraordinary. The female mind is a complex landscape of emotion, memory, and imagination, and much of her arousal begins not in the body, but in the brain. When a woman feels understood, seen, and emotionally engaged, her body follows with greater receptivity and warmth. This is because psychological safety is the gateway to physical openness. The act of communicating, both verbally and nonverbally, signals to her nervous system that it is safe to relax, explore, and feel. When communication flows naturally, arousal is no longer something to achieve, it becomes something that unfolds. The key to this process lies in attunement, the ability to sense and respond to another person's inner experience. A partner who listens with genuine curiosity, who notices shifts in breathing, tone, or expression, creates a silent dialogue that builds trust. Communication isn't only about asking direct questions, it's about reading her cues and responding to them with patience and care. When a woman feels that her comfort matters more than performance, her body relaxes, her breathing deepens, and her sensitivity heightens. This is the physiological reflection of emotional connection. Her brain releases oxytocin and dopamine, reinforcing the pleasure of being understood. Words also hold immense power. The tone, choice, and timing of language can either open or close the heart. When words are used to affirm, to appreciate, and to invite rather than demand, they deepen the emotional bond. Many women experience arousal through psychological anticipation, the space between words, the pause before touch, the way a partner expresses presence and patience. This psychological engagement stimulates imagination and emotional excitement, two of the most powerful catalysts for female pleasure. A woman's mind can amplify sensation when she feels emotionally connected and mentally stimulated, creating a loop where communication and arousal feed one another. However, communication must be grounded in honesty. Pretending to know what she wants or assuming what works can break the delicate balance of trust. True connection comes from asking, from being willing to learn and adjust. This humility creates safety, and safety creates freedom. The freedom to express, to explore, and to experience without fear of judgment or pressure. When communication becomes a shared journey of discovery, intimacy evolves beyond physical satisfaction into emotional fulfillment. Ultimately, communication is not about talking more, but about listening deeper. It's about seeing your partner as a whole person, emotional, psychological, and physical, and meeting her in all those layers with presence. When a woman feels emotionally heard, her body becomes an extension of that understanding. The most powerful arousal, then, is not built on technique but on connection. It is the harmony between two people who trust each other enough to communicate, explore, and respond with empathy. In that space, intimacy transforms into a conversation without words, where touch becomes language and connection becomes memory. What makes intimacy truly powerful is not the perfection of technique, but the depth of connection. The female body is not a puzzle to be solved or a sequence of steps to be mastered. It is a living, feeling expression of her mind, emotions, and spirit. When you understand that arousal begins with safety, communication, and emotional presence, you begin to see that pleasure is not just a physical experience, but an emotional language. Every touch, every look, every word carries energy, and that energy teaches her whether she can open or whether she must protect herself. True mastery in intimacy comes when a partner learns to read that language and respond to it with respect, curiosity, and love. Science reminds us that the body and mind are deeply intertwined, but it is empathy that turns that science into art. The breasts, like all erogenous zones, respond not just to stimulation, but to emotion, to the feeling of being cared for, understood, and desired with patience. When touch is guided by awareness rather than performance, the experience becomes transformative for both partners. It's a moment where time slows, where two nervous systems sync, and where physical pleasure becomes a mirror of emotional harmony. That's when intimacy stops being something done to someone and becomes something shared, a wordless dialogue between trust and desire. So, as you take this knowledge with you, remember that pleasure is not something to chase, it's something to create together. When you lead with understanding, when you listen with your hands and your heart, when you honor her changing rhythms and communicate with presence, you make intimacy an act of healing, not just excitement. That is what makes a woman think, feel, and remember you long after the moment ends, because you did not just touch her body, you touched her sense of safety, her confidence, and her connection to herself. Thank you for taking the time to learn something that too few people ever explore with this level of care and awareness. In a world that often rushes through connection, your willingness to slow down and understand the science and psychology of pleasure makes you part of a much needed change, one that values connection over conquest and emotion over ego. Wishing you wisdom, patience, and confidence as you bring these insights into your relationships. May every moment of intimacy you share be one of trust, presence, and genuine connection. Good luck on your journey. And thank you for being here, for listening, and for choosing to learn the deeper side of love and pleasure